The night before my wedding, I heard quiet voices coming from the guest room. I wasn't planning to listen, but then I heard my fiancé whisper, "Tomorrow everything will finally belong to us." My heart started racing. I slowly walked toward the door and pushed it open. I froze. My sister was standing in front of the mirror wearing my wedding dress. She looked at me, smiled with tears in her eyes, and quietly said, "I'm sorry, but tomorrow he won't be your husband." My fiancé suddenly turned around and looked completely shocked. No one moved. My whole world fell apart in that single moment. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my phone. I looked from my sister to my fiancé, hoping someone would laugh and tell me it was all a terrible joke. But nobody smiled. The silence was louder than any scream. "What is happening?" I whispered. My voice was weak, and I could barely recognize it. My fiancé opened his mouth to speak, but my sister raised her hand. "Please," she said softly, "let me explain first." I stared at her in disbelief. She was wearing the dress I had dreamed about since I was a little girl. It had taken me almost a year to find the perfect one. Now it looked completely different. It no longer felt like my wedding dress. My fiancé took one step toward me. "Emily, this isn't what you think," he said. I wanted to believe him because I loved him with all my heart, but something inside me told me to stay where I was. For the first time, I was afraid of the man I planned to marry. My sister slowly took off the dress and carefully placed it on the bed. She treated it with respect, almost as if she knew how much it meant to me. Then she reached into her handbag and pulled out a large brown envelope. She held it tightly with both hands. She looked terrified. "I found this today," she whispered. "I wasn't looking for it. It was hidden inside his office drawer." She looked at my fiancé for only a second before looking back at me. "You deserve to know the truth before tomorrow." My fiancé's face suddenly changed. The confident smile he always had disappeared. He stepped forward quickly and reached for the envelope. "Give that to me," he said in a cold voice I had never heard before. It didn't sound like the man I loved. My sister quickly moved behind me. "No," she replied firmly. "She has the right to read it." I looked at both of them, completely confused. My heart was beating so fast that I thought I might faint. I had no idea whom I should believe. Slowly, I reached out and took the envelope from my sister. It felt heavier than I expected. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were several photographs, printed emails, and legal documents. None of it made sense at first. I picked up the first photograph. It showed my fiancé sitting at a restaurant with a woman I had never seen before. They were holding hands across the table. In another picture, they were hugging outside a hotel. My chest became painfully tight. "Who is she?" I asked quietly. My fiancé looked away instead of answering. His silence scared me more than any words could. My sister gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "There is more," she said. "Please keep reading." I turned to the next page. It was a printed email between my fiancé and someone named Daniel. The subject line read, "After the wedding." My eyes quickly moved across the page. I didn't understand every sentence, but one line made my blood run cold. "Once we're married, everything she owns will be within our reach." I looked up at my fiancé. His face had turned pale, and for the first time since I met him, he looked guilty. I couldn't believe what I had just read. My hands were shaking so much that I almost dropped the papers. I looked at my fiancé, waiting for him to tell me it was all fake. Instead, he stayed completely silent. His silence felt like an answer. "Tell me this isn't true," I said. Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him. He took a deep breath but couldn't find the right words. For the first time, I saw fear in his face. I felt my heart breaking. "It's not what it looks like," he finally whispered. His voice sounded weak and uncertain. I wanted to believe him because I loved him. But the documents were right in front of me. They told a completely different story. My sister gently picked up another sheet of paper. "You haven't seen the worst part yet," she said quietly. She handed me a document with my full name on it. I felt cold as I started reading. It was a loan agreement. Someone had applied for a huge loan using my personal information. My address was correct. My birthday was correct. Even my signature looked real. "I never signed this," I whispered. I looked at my fiancé in shock. He quickly looked away. That single movement told me more than any explanation ever could. "I found a copy of your passport in his office," my sister said. "There were also copies of your bank statements." My legs became weak. I sat down on the edge of the bed because I felt dizzy. Everything around me seemed unreal. My fiancé suddenly stepped closer. "Emily, please let me explain." His voice was louder now. He reached for my hand. I immediately pulled it away. "Don't touch me," I said. My voice was calm, but inside I was falling apart. I had trusted this man with my whole heart. Now I didn't know who he really was. He covered his face with both hands. "I made mistakes," he admitted. "But I never wanted to hurt you." His words sounded empty. I no longer knew what to believe. My sister opened another envelope. Inside were printed text messages. She quietly placed them on the bed beside me. "Read these," she said. The first messages looked normal. Then I noticed the dates. They had been sent only 3 days earlier. My fiancé had been talking to another woman almost every night. "I can't wait until she signs the marriage papers," one message said. Another message made my heart stop. "After the wedding, we'll sell her apartment. She will never suspect anything." I covered my mouth with my hand. My grandmother had left that apartment to me before she passed away. It was the only thing I had left from her. I couldn't believe someone wanted to take it away from me. Tears rolled down my face. I remembered all the times my fiancé had asked me about the apartment. He wanted to know its value. He wanted to know if I planned to sell it. At the time, I thought he was just curious. Now every conversation had a different meaning. I looked at him one more time. "Did you ever love me?" I asked softly. The room became completely silent. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. That was the answer I never wanted to hear. Just as I was about to speak again, someone started knocking loudly on the front door. The knocking became louder and louder. My fiancé's face suddenly turned white. He whispered only 3 words. "They found me." The knocking became louder every second. My fiancé stood frozen in the middle of the room. His face had lost all its color. I had never seen him look so afraid. My sister quietly stepped closer to me. "Who is at the door?" I asked. Nobody answered me. My fiancé looked around the room as if he wanted to escape. Then he suddenly ran toward the back door, but my sister quickly stood in his way. "You are not leaving," she said firmly. He pushed past her and rushed into the hallway. Before he could unlock the back door, someone knocked again. This time, the knocking sounded even stronger. My heart was beating so fast that I could barely think. I slowly walked toward the front door. Every step felt heavier than the last. My hand was shaking as I reached for the handle. I took a deep breath and opened the door. 2 police officers were standing outside. Behind them, a black police car was parked near the house. One officer looked at me kindly. "Good evening," he said. "Is Daniel Carter here?" I looked back at my fiancé. He closed his eyes for a moment. He knew exactly why they had come. He didn't even try to deny his name. The truth was finally catching up with him. The officers stepped inside the house. One of them showed an official document. "We have a warrant to question Mr. Carter in connection with financial fraud and identity theft," he explained. I felt the room begin to spin. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. My fiancé finally spoke. "Emily, please don't believe everything they say." His voice was desperate. "I was going to tell you the truth after the wedding." His words only made everything worse. "After the wedding?" I repeated. "After you took my apartment? After you ruined my life?" Tears rolled down my face. I could no longer recognize the man standing in front of me. The officers asked him to put his hands behind his back. He looked at me one last time. For a brief second, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he lowered his head without saying a word. As they walked him toward the front door, another woman suddenly got out of the police car. She looked nervous and tired. When she saw my fiancé, she started crying. Then she looked directly at me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know he was engaged." I stared at her in complete shock. She slowly walked closer. "He promised that he loved me," she said. "He told me he was single." She handed me a small box. Inside was a silver ring. It looked almost exactly like the engagement ring on my finger. My stomach turned. "He asked me to marry him 2 months ago," she said quietly. I couldn't breathe. My knees became weak and I sat down on the stairs. Everything I believed about my future disappeared in a single night. Every promise had been a lie. The woman looked at me with tears in her eyes. "When the police contacted me, I finally understood everything," she said. "I wanted to warn you before it was too late." I looked at my sister. She was crying too. She admitted that she had spent weeks collecting evidence because she suspected something was wrong. She was afraid I would never believe her without proof. That was why she had put on my wedding dress. She knew it was the only thing that would make me stop and listen. At that moment, I realized something that changed my life forever. The person I believed had betrayed me was actually the one who had saved me. I couldn't stop crying. My wedding was supposed to be in less than 12 hours. Instead of choosing flowers and decorations, I was watching the police take away the man I loved. My dream had turned into my worst nightmare. I felt completely empty. My sister sat beside me without saying a word. She gently held my hand. We stayed there in silence for several minutes. Neither of us knew what to say. The house felt colder than ever. "I'm sorry," she whispered at last. "I knew you would hate me when you saw me wearing your dress." She looked down at the floor. "But I couldn't let you marry him." I looked at her through my tears. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I asked. My voice was quiet but full of pain. She took a deep breath before answering. I could see guilt in her eyes. "I tried," she said softly. "Every time I wanted to tell you, he was always nearby." She explained that my fiancé watched everything she did. He even checked her phone once. She was afraid he would destroy the evidence. A week earlier, she had accidentally seen him meeting another woman at a cafe. At first, she thought he was simply cheating, but then she heard them talking about money. They were discussing my apartment and my bank account. She decided to follow him. Over the next few days, she secretly took photos and copied documents whenever she had the chance. Every new piece of evidence made the situation even worse. She realized he had planned everything long before he proposed to me. "I didn't wear your dress to hurt you," she said with tears in her eyes. "I knew you would stop and look at me." She smiled sadly. "If I had simply called your name, you would have believed him instead of me." I closed my eyes. She was right. If she had only shown me the papers, I probably would have defended him. I loved him too much to imagine he could betray me. The next morning, guests started calling my phone. They wanted to know what time they should arrive. Some of them had already traveled from other cities. I didn't know what to tell them. With shaking hands, I sent one message to everyone. "The wedding has been canceled. Thank you for your love and understanding." My phone immediately filled with replies. Some people asked if I was okay. Others offered to come and support me. Reading their kind messages reminded me that I wasn't alone. Later that afternoon, I carefully placed my wedding dress back into its box. I smiled through my tears. The dress was still beautiful. It simply belonged to a future that would never happen. A few weeks later, the police contacted me again. They told me they had found several other victims. My fiancé had lied to many women over the years. He had stolen money, identities, and even family homes. One officer looked at me and said, "If your sister hadn't come forward, he might have continued doing this for many more years." I turned toward my sister. Without saying a word, I hugged her as tightly as I could. She started crying too. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. "I thought you betrayed me," I whispered. She smiled through her tears. "I was only trying to save you." Months passed. My heart slowly began to heal. Life was different now, but it was honest. I learned that broken dreams can make room for better ones. Sometimes I still think about that terrible night. The night I believed I had lost everything. But the truth is, that was the night I got my life back.